big government. You don't just need a government to deal with these two things effectively.
Okay, guys. New order placed to buy euro at 121.27. I'm placing new order to buy at 121.27. It's I'm talking about euro. Probably you will see right here on the top of the screen. This is chart of euro against United States dollar. Yeah. Okay.
An election, and this party could reach maybe 8–10%. So, you know, all in all, people have been a bit dismayed by a government crisis at the moment. The truth is, the Italian population is very divided. Remember, this strange coalition reshuffles happened because the last election, there were really three blocks: center-right, center-left, and five-star movement, and none of them really reached enough seats to form a government. So we have a very divided polity at the moment. Of course, incredibly difficult challenges from the economic crisis to the health crisis, and unfortunately, no real side of a strong government ahead.
Well, you know, Ferdinando, very importantly here, you say that this leader is popular. If he's popular, why is he doing this?
Well, he's doing this because Italy is a parliamentary democracy, and what matters is whether you've got enough support in parliament. And at the moment, Giuseppe Conte just doesn't have that. He managed to get a vote of confidence in the Senate by a very tiny majority, and the result was that at the first critical issue, a vote on a reform of justice, the government simply didn't have the votes. So Conte benefited from the fact that Italy is a parliamentary democracy because he's been able to kind of rearrange coalitions and stay as prime minister. But now he's suffering. He's paying a price for that. He may be popular among the people, but he just doesn't have the votes in parliament.
Ferdinando, first of all, Tom, you're Italian. It's okay. Could do much, much, much better. Please get back to work with the Rosetta Stone.
I'm working on it every day.
I'm being so polite.
Oh, thank you, Fran. I am the ugly American. Terribile.
Okay, position opened at 121.27. So if you're looking to trade euro, it's time to buy. So you had to place an order to buy euro. Anybody who wants to find out why we place this order right here at this price, well, you need to get a strategy, right? So, and you will understand why we did it. Okay, speak to you later, guys.
That vaccine hasn't even got close to get an approval in the US, so that suggests a little bit of caution. But generally, there are problems with rollout. There are countries like the Netherlands, France, Belgium, which have really been very slow. I mean, if we look at the number, the EU is around 2 doses per 100 inhabitants. The UK is more than 10. Israel, of course, is about 40. So there needs to be urgency, and politicians, I think, should of course enforce their contracts, but stop just seeking scapegoats. I feel, you know, some of this stuff against pharmaceutical companies is part of this blame-shifting game.
Ferdinando, I was on the Upper West Side of Manhattan yesterday and observed the complete collapse of small business in America. I was thunderstruck, folks, how bad it was. Italy is the land of small business. I mean, everybody knows that. It's been the industry for centuries. How is small business in Italy coping right now, in Venice, in Genoa, and down south?
Well, look, I mean, if you're thinking, for example, of tourist places, I mean, think about just the Dolomites and the places, you know, the wonderful mountain ski resorts, which at the moment are closed. Many of these restaurants and bars will probably never open again. Some businesses are displaying a lot of ingenuity, moving into online, you know, sales, doing wonders with providers such as Amazon, and that's great. But I think when we'll get to the end of this pandemic, hopefully soon, I suspect we'll see tens, if not hundreds of thousands of businesses which will no longer be there. Our favorite bar where to have espresso in a corner of Rome may be unfortunately shut down after all.
Okay, Ferdinando, more takeaway espressos, please, to keep those people in jobs. Ferdinando Giuliano, there, Bloomberg Opinion columnist. Now let's get straight to the Bloomberg First Word News. Here's Ritika Gupta. Hi, Ritika.
Thanks, Francine. Now it's up to the Senate. A House delegation went to the Senate to formally present the lawmakers with the single impeachment charge against Donald Trump. He's accused of incitement to insurrection. Arguments are set to begin February 8th. Getting a conviction may be difficult. There would have to be at least 17 Republican senators who vote to convict. And former President Trump has opened an office in Florida to, quote, advance the interests of the United States and to carry on the agenda. A statement was released just before the House delivered the article of impeachment to the Senate. The statement's letterhead indicates the office will operate out of Palm Beach. The former president moved to his resort there last week. And Janet Yellen's first tasks as Treasury Secretary include selling President Biden's new stimulus package and hiring a staff. The Senate confirmed Yellen's nomination by a vote of 84 to 15. She'll be the first woman to hold the job. During her confirmation hearings, Yellen argued that it's time to act big with deficit spending to avoid long-term problems. That argument was rejected by Republicans concerned about rising debt. Meanwhile, President Biden says he is open to negotiating that proposed $1.9 trillion stimulus, but he's not ruling out going after a Democrat-only route for passage. Republicans have rejected the price tag as too high. Even some Democrats have questions about the size of the package. Global News 24 hours a day on air and at Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Ritika Gupta. This is Bloomberg. Tom?
Ritika, thanks so much. An important swearing in. The Vice President of the United States will swear in Janet Yellen at 12 noon. That is scheduled today as Secretary of Treasury, and also the Vice President and the second gentleman with a second dose of their vaccine later this afternoon. Some of the tidbits we're seeing out of the White House, the new White House this morning. Ronit Goes, Citigroup, head of bank research on the state of banking. Last time we talked to him, it was very valuable. Stay with us. Futures at -8. Francine Lacroix with a great panel today in London. This is Bloomberg. Good morning.
Bloomberg Television is reinventing one of the most iconic brands in financial television for a new audience. Join me to see the news program for the clever investor. This is Bloomberg Wall Street Week.
Our generation's biggest problem.
Climate change is happening.
And the world's most innovative solutions.
Transport, industry, buildings, electricity, all of those things.
Everything you need to know about our changing environment. The politics of global warming.
We can and we will deal with climate change.
In the fight against climate change, Bloomberg Green has you covered.
Their CPG history, their experience, and really how we might be able to combine together to really create this fantastic public company. And so we kind of got into the SPAC thing a little bit before it became such a hot method of going public.
The capital reserve that we already had
and the capital generation of our business model gives us the confidence that we can announce this 4 billion Swiss franc share buyback program for the next 3 years. The biggest risk is really, where is this pandemic truly going? On one side, we see the light at the end of the tunnel with the vaccine programs really taking off, and therefore we're increasingly confident that that this pandemic will come to an end. On the other side, specifically here in Europe, the lockdowns are more strict than ever, which will have a further deteriorating effect on the economy, on the real economy, and it's really that unpredictability as to how long the pandemic will really take, and when the economy can really start off again, and what is then the shape of that economy. I think that's the true risk that we need to see and that we need to manage this year.
Well, that was the newly minted UBS Chief Executive, Ralph Harmers, now joining us to talk about banks, European banks, possible cross-border consolidation, even Wall Street banks, as Ronak goes. He is Citi Global Head of Bank Research. Ronak, great to speak to you today after the earnings of UBS. There are a number of questions about cross-border consolidation, what exactly these banks will become. But before we get to that, what is your immediate thought on UBS? We don't know how the capital markets will do, and we don't know what the future of its investment bank really is.
Sure. So we have a constructive view on the European bank sector, and we're particularly within that positive on the Swiss banks, on both the big Swiss banks. The results that we've seen coming through already, both from the Americans and now from the Europeans, shows that fourth quarter was good. What investors are now asking questions about, though, is the outlook. What is 21 going to be like? When are we going to get strategy updates? Can this amazing 2020 trading performance be sustained? So lots of questions, but the outlook looks better, a lot better than any time than the last 6 to 9 months.
Will we see cross-border consolidation in 2021?
We're definitely seeing M&A come back on the map in both the US and Europe. Cross-border is harder. The ECB are trying to encourage it. The regulators and the policymakers want to create bigger European banks. But initially, we think it'll be domestic in-market consolidation, like we've seen in Spain, in Italy, in the US, and also kind of bank to non-bank. So banks buying asset managers, banks buying brokers. So pan-financial consolidation is also back on the agenda.
Ronak, Tom Keene in America, good morning. I just really want to congratulate you on your 61-page stack. It's really quite smart. Folks, we protect the copyright of all our guests. You can get that through Citigroup. Ronak, I'm going to cut to the chase. What permeates your 61-page deck is the lack of profitability. How do they fix that?
So there is a structural profitability point and a problem, particularly in Europe. Less so for the Swiss banks and the American banks, but in the Eurozone, interest rates are low and growth is low and costs are high. So there's hopes of rates rising in the long end of the yield curve, particularly in the US. There's a bit of growth coming back. Asset quality will be better. That'll help results. But there's a structural underlying problem, which is, I guess, relates to your earlier question on M&A. There needs to be fewer banks and costs need to be lower. So efficiencies need to improve. The only part of Europe where banks make good money consistently is in Scandinavia. And they have very low cost-income ratios, and that allows them to make money. So it's good. It's a structural problem.
Well, it's a structural problem, I understand, but they've got to fix it. Now, you've also mentioned the European banks, such as Mr. Staley, who Francine's going to talk to later today, doing business in America. I don't want to get you in trouble with Ms. Fraser, but what is holding back the mating of profit-desiring U.S. banks and profit-desiring EU banks? Culture?
Consolidation is much easier inside markets. If you're a big American bank, your interest in Europe has historically been in capital markets and investment banking. And most big US banks already have established, in many cases very successful, corporate banks and capital market operations. Buying a big European bank comes with very large balance sheets and other issues. that doesn't tend to be high up the agenda for an American bank right now. So I would expect the consolidations to be more inside single countries in Europe, then cross-border within Europe, and then bank to asset manager or bank to wealth manager. I'm not expecting whether it's Asia to the US, US to Europe, intercontinental cross-border M&A.
Ronald, do you have a favorite European bank at the moment, either because it's unfairly valued or it could be unlocking some potential? And where's the most lucrative part of a European bank right now? Is it still German Mittelstand when things get better?
Sure. So as I said before, we're positive and constructive on the European banks. Regions we like, areas we like the Swiss because of their business mix, more fee income. We actually like the UK domestic banks as well, because we think there'll be better profitability this year. Vaccines are making good progress. So those are among the big banks, two areas we're quite fond of, the Swiss and the domestic UK. And as I said, structurally, long-term, the way you make money in the sector is own high ROE banks that compound book value. Those tend to be in Northern Europe, Scandinavia, and the Benelux. So that's where I'd be looking for long-term investors.
Ronald, what's the difference between a UBS and a Credit Suisse right now?
Good question.
That's a very long question. I mean, our published view is we're positive on both. We've had Credit Suisse in our top picks list for a while, so there's a valuation difference.
Well, there's a valuation difference. Come on, Ronald, we love having you on. Does Switzerland now, in the new technology, do they have room for two major banks, or is it inevitable that they consolidate?
Well, the banks, the two big Swiss banks are obviously beyond just the local markets, right? Sure. So, those are two of the biggest global wealth managers out there, biggest private banks in the world. There's no reason why there can't be two Swiss banks at the top of the list of the world's biggest wealth managers. If all they did was retail banking and domestic SME banking, that'd be a different question. But their market is the whole world. So the fact that there's two of them, I don't think it matters much.
What is the distinctive threat of the American banks who want to take marginal business in Europe? What is the distinction of how they do business, including your Citigroup?
So the main difference is the American banks in Europe tend to be focused on quite targeted clients and business lines. Most of the American banks in Europe are not universal banks. They're not trying to be everything for everyone. And that's a problem for many of the local European banks. So there are certain clients, be it high net worth individuals, large companies, certain products, certain services, IPOs. So it's a very targeted approach, and that's the difference. There was a time, maybe 10, 15 years ago, when American banks had mass market, consumer operations, credit card businesses, and so on in Europe. That time is gone.
Ronald, thank you so much for joining us. Ronald Goose there, Citi Global Head of Bank Research. Now, coming up on the United Nations Climate Change Conference, Bloomberg will be speaking to Alok Sharma, COP26 president. He'll be joining Bloomberg exclusively for a conversation on some of the UK efforts. Of course, Glasgow is the host city of COP26 later in the year. That interview, 11:30 a.m. in New York, that's 4:30 p.m. in London, and this is Bloomberg.
Are you ready to announce today that you're running for president in 2024?
Well, that would really break some news. Your show would get more, a lot of eyeballs if we said something like that, David.
Give you a sense of the real-time action, the 10-year yield tumbling now 11 basis points, so continuing in this knee-jerk risk-off feel.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance. I'm Rishka Gupta with your Bloomberg Business Flash. Shares of China's internet behemoth Tencent Holdings slumped in Hong Kong. A world-beating surge in the stock had pushed its market value close to $1 trillion for the first time. But an advisor to China's central bank made comments to local media indicating that excessive liquidity and cheap borrowing costs were creating bubbles. Twitter has banned the CEO of MyPillow, Mike Lindell, who insisted that Donald Trump was the real winner of the presidential election. Lindell was banished for violating Twitter's civic integrity policy. He continued to insist the election was rigged, even after the Capitol riots that left several people dead. And Harvard and Yale are amongst the universities whose multi-billion-dollar endowments have been buying cryptocurrency. According to a report in CoinDesk, most have been buying digital currency for at least a year. The biggest of those currencies, Bitcoin, rose fourfold in 2020 and gained even more to start this year. And that is your latest Bloomberg Business Flash. Francine.
Rudiger, thanks so much. Now, this is what the markets are looking at. We did have a bit of a correction yesterday in U.S. equities because of a pushback, certainly a possible delay in the recovery fund, or at least what we heard, the stimulus in Congress. Now, global stocks pretty much mixed. We do have a bit of M&A news here in Europe. It's giving the markets a bit of a boost. Worries about new virus variants, but also hurdles to the stimulus proposal in the U.S. They'll continue with the risk-off mood. Tom, I'm not seeing a lot of news for the moment on the market impact of volatile politics in Italy. I guess it's something that we're more or less accustomed to, especially when you have the ECB staying firm with PEP.
Yeah, the politics side is there, but also earnings coming in. Joe Feldman at Telsey Advisory Group out on Amazon moments ago with a price move up to $4,000. A nice lift for Joe Feldman. His enthusiasm on Amazon. Bitcoin not with much enthusiasm today, down a little bit. It's within range, I'm going to call it as well. And of course, the VIX 23.85 as we struggle with the data check. We need clarity on the American economy. It will be delivered by Andrew Hollenhorst of Citigroup. We do that next. This is Bloomberg. Good morning.
Continues to be, recovering well. And with the opening up that was decided at the last 5-year plan, that is a golden opportunity for many international banks.
So we'll look to double our footprint across IB and also wealth management and asset management in the 3 to 5 year time frame.
Growth outlook structurally is very strong. But it does need to consolidate and allow time to help the share price appreciation to move more in sync with the growth.
So China can avoid further decoupling if they stop these inappropriate actions.
But at the moment, we really want to see the dust settle first on international relationships, on China's role in the global economy.
I don't see a likelihood of a big change in the policy with the change of administrations.
this morning, suddenly yields, well, they reversed. Perhaps, well, Schumer says a lack of stimulus till March. Maybe as well, a wait for big tech earnings. Equity futures, they slipped this morning. The minority leader, well, he relents as the majority say the Senate will not be like the rabble in the House. The filibuster, it will endure. Pro tip, Senator Portman of the minority, Senator Portman of Ohio, done with gridlock. And no doubt, Secretary Yellen will listen to Chairman Powell's press conference tomorrow. Good morning, everyone. Bloomberg Surveillance Worldwide. Francine Lacroix in London. I'm Tom Keene in New York. Francine, any number of news flow, but we are waiting for news, as we saw in the Netherlands a few days ago from Italy. And is it right to say a collapse of the government?
Well, it's, of course, something that's calculated, Tom, so it's not really a collapse. We were talking about a collapse when Matteo Renzi just 10 days ago withdrew his support from the government. This is a calculated move by the current prime minister in saying he can resign and then forming a new government that's a bit more solid for him. Of course, a number of questions out there on who does he ally himself with. So we could see a whole new government, but it's unlikely at this point, from what I'm hearing, that we'll have fresh elections in Italy.
Well, we will see. One of the stores are falling, and then, of course, the vaccine as well. Francine, the basic tone I got, including Ferdinando Giuliano's wonderful essay on the failure of Europe, is just that. Francine, from where you sit in London, is it a failure of vaccine programs in Europe?
So, Tom, I'm quite careful because, of course, what we're doing, the premise for our analysis is the last 2 to 3 weeks. You could see a sudden turn with a significant ramp up of vaccination, but certainly when you look at the UK, that I think have vaccinated more people in the last 3 days than a country like France since the beginning of the year, you wonder why France and Italy are so far behind the UK that really have it sorted. Again, Tom, it's not only about doses, it's actually where you can get the vaccination. Doctors sign off. Here you can actually get them at the pharmacy. So the whole distribution is different from country to country.
Well, interesting. In America, the vice president and the second gentleman will be getting their second dose of the vaccine today. With our first word news in New York, here's Ritika Gupta.
Thanks, Tom. A delegation of House members took the next steps in the impeachment process. The lawmakers delivered the single article of impeachment against Donald Trump to the Senate. That triggered the start of an unprecedented trial of the former president. He's accused of incitement to insurrection. Janet Yellen's first tasks as Treasury Secretary include selling President Biden's new stimulus package and hiring a staff. The Senate confirmed Yellen's nomination by a vote of 84 to 15. She'll be the first woman to hold the job. During her confirmation hearings, Yellen argued that it's time to act big with deficit spending to avoid long-term problems. That argument was rejected by Republicans concerned about rising debt. And Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell is ready to move towards a power-sharing agreement with the Democrats. McConnell had refused to agree to any deal to share power in the 50-50 Senate because Democrats wouldn't promise not to scrap the filibuster. That allows the minority to block legislation by requiring 60 votes to advance most bills. But 2 Democrats say they support the filibuster, and McConnell said that's good enough. The British government is considering whether to use hotels to quarantine travellers arriving to the UK. The goal is to stop the spread of new coronavirus variants from overseas. Prime Minister Boris Johnson meets with senior officials today. Global news 24 hours a day on air and at Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Ritika Gupta. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Francine.
Ritika, thanks so much. The data point for today is 2. All is right in America as there are not 1 but 2 dogs back at the White House. Champ is the older dog at 12 years old. Major's a bit younger. Champ in the foreground there with the First Lady. Rumor has it, Francine, the rug in the green room, the French rug in the green room, has been christened, and they were out on the South Lawn yesterday as well. Futures at -7. Francine?
Yeah, with the dog updates. I think we heard them on, or someone heard them actually on a conference call with the president. I mean, it kind of brings, the normality of living day to day with dogs, even at the White House. Stocks are a little bit mixed today, Tom. Dollar is pretty much flat. Treasury yields are rising. Again, there are worries about the new virus variants, and there are worries about hurdles to the stimulus proposal in the U.S., Tom.
Very good. Right now, we will look at comments made yesterday by a newly minted President Biden.
We can't afford not to invest now. We can't afford to fail to invest now. And I think there's a growing realization of that on the part of all but some very, very hard-edged partisans, maybe on both sides. But I think there is a growing consensus. Whether we get it all done exactly the way I want it remains to be seen. But I'm confident that we can work our way through.
Into the first 100 days with interesting news flow, and of course the drama of the walk of the impeachment over to the Senate yesterday as well. Emily Wilkins is our Bloomberg congressional reporter and joins us this morning. Emily, what is the significance of Portman of Ohio saying, "I'm done"?
When Rob Portman said that he would retire yesterday, it came as a shock to a lot of people. He was not on the retirement watch list, but in a statement, he does point out that he feels like he's a moderate in the Senate. He's a moderate Republican. He's open to work with Democrats. He has sided with Democrats on some issues, and he said in a statement that he feels like there's not that much of a spot for him anymore, a place in a hyper-partisan Senate that he just doesn't feel like he can be as effective.
What is the significance of this, not only to Republicans from Democrats? You remember the House retirements here 2 years ago, 3 years ago as well. Do you anticipate that there'll be many other Rob Portmans?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, we already are seeing some more moderate individuals. Richard Burr, Pat Toomey, perhaps not as moderate as Portman, but they have also announced their they've also announced their retirements. They will not be returning. It's interesting though, because you have this happening in the Senate, but then in the House you have the Problem Solvers Caucus, which is a bipartisan caucus dedicated on getting both sides to work together, and they just expanded their membership by 16 members, so they have grown. So there's definitely an appetite for bipartisanship on the Hill. It's just hard to do because the country is so partisan right now. And with those individuals who are more in the middle, you're also seeing more individuals on either side.
Good morning, Emily. So what's your take on what kind of stimulus proposal would actually get through? Is it size? Is it where the money goes? Or is it just a delay in timing?
I think those are great questions. I mean, Chuck Schumer said yesterday that he was expecting a month to 6 weeks to pass some stimulus funding. There are also debates about passing a slimmer stimulus bill. We heard after this weekend the potential idea of just doing something focused particularly on getting funding toward vaccines and getting vaccines out there. I think this is something that we're going to see negotiated not just in the next 2 weeks before impeachment, but it also sounds like after the impeachment trial, this is still something lawmakers are going to be discussing.
When do we find out, Emily, what kind of, how quickly or how late this will pass?
That's the million-dollar question. I mean, Biden has made this a priority. He is definitely working towards getting this out quickly. You heard in his remarks yesterday sort of saying that speed is of the essence here. But look, this is Congress. This is the Senate. They're not a body known for moving particularly quickly.
Okay, guys, stop on profit for euro at 121.29. Yep. Let's place stop on profit, and as you can see, whatever happened, yep, it's right here. Whatever happened, you're already guys in profit. That's it. Position closed at 121.29. Well done, all of you who follow the trade. Whatever spread you got from your broker, £5 or £30 or £20. In our case, we have £100 spread. 2 pips gives you 2 pips of profit. Okay, well done.
Freshman made a splash yet? I mean, you're wired up to the white marble of the Capitol. Is it too early to know which freshmen are sort of providing leadership?
That depends on the House or in the Senate. In the House, one of the people who I think is particularly interesting is Peter Meyer. He's a Republican. He's of Michigan. He's a freshman, and he was one of the 10 House Republicans to go ahead and vote for impeachment. He's gotten a lot of flack and pushback from it, and he represents, just a very interesting district there.
Emily, what are you watching out for the rest of the week? I know that, Joe Biden has also spoke to a number of world leaders. I think the only one he tweeted about was Angela Merkel.
definitely going to be keeping an eye on Biden, any other executive actions from him. He's obviously signed a ton in the last several days. Also keeping an eye out for how the Senate moves forward now that McConnell and Schumer have come to a power-sharing agreement.
Emily, we're out of time. I got one key question. Do any senators or House people, do they have dogs in their office like Champ and Major at the White House?
Well, I feel the most important thing about Champ and Major is that they are shelter dogs. This is a shelter dog that has made it all the way to the White House, first time ever. Incredibly important for all the shelter dogs out there.
Good, and then pretty soon they'll have a new puppy, which will be good, and there'll be a 3-dog night at the White House. Emily Wilkins, what's sad is Emily Wilkins has no clue who 3-dog night is. Okay, Emily Wilkins, thank you so much, our congressional reporter. Wait, Francine Lacroix has no idea.
We're too young, Tom, too young.
3-dog.
Different generation.
Night is, yes. Let us celebrate. Okay, coming up on Balance of Power, Governor Phil Murphy of New Jersey.